Jayla Washington stands frozen in the jet bridge as flight attendant Bethany Miller publicly ridicules her worn designer bag, calling it obviously fake and suggesting she couldn't afford real luxury items. Other passengers stare and whisper. Suddenly, an authoritative voice cuts through. Is there a problem with my wife's niece, Ms. Miller? Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If this kind of injustice makes your blood boil, hit that like button and subscribe to see more stories about people standing up against discrimination. Now, let's rewind and see how Jayla ended up in this humiliating situation. 19-year-old Jayla Washington had always been exceptional. Growing up in the south side of Chicago, she navigated the challenges of her neighborhood with grace and determination that impressed everyone who knew her. Despite attending an underfunded public school, Jayla maintained a perfect 4.0 GPA, served as president of the debate team, and somehow found time to volunteer at the local community center teaching computer skills to elderly residents. None of this came easily. Her mother Tasha worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads, morning shifts at a hospital cafeteria, afternoon hours as an office cleaner, and weekend work doing hair from their small apartment. Their neighborhood wasn't the safest, but it was tight-knit, with neighbors who looked out for each other. Education is your ticket out, Tasha reminded Jayla daily. They can take your possessions, but nobody can ever take what's in your head. When the letter arrived announcing Jayla's acceptance to Stanford University's prestigious summer program for gifted high school students, Tasha broke down crying. Not only had Jayla been accepted, but she'd received a full scholarship covering tuition, room, and board. Only 50 students nationwide received this honor. Your father would be so proud, Tasha whispered, holding Jayla close. James Washington had died when Jayla was just 8 years old, the victim of a stray bullet while walking home from work. Though 9 years had passed, his absence remained a palpable void in their lives. The only challenge was getting to Stanford. The scholarship didn't cover transportation, and airfare from Chicago to San Francisco wasn't in their budget. That's when Jayla's uncle Keith stepped in. Keith Johnson had grown up in the same Chicago neighborhood but made it out through a basketball scholarship. Though his NBA dreams ended with a knee injury in college, he'd pivoted successfully into sports management and eventually married Alexis Armstrong, sister of airline magnate Maxwell Armstrong. Despite his wealth and connections, Keith remained humble and connected to his roots, regularly returning to mentor kids in his old neighborhood. Consider it my investment in your future, Keith told Jayla, presenting her with the plane ticket. First class, because future world changers deserve the best. Then he surprised her with something else, a genuine Louis Vuitton carry-on bag. It was your Aunt Alexis's first designer bag, Keith explained. She wanted you to have it for your journey. The bag was well loved, showing signs of travel and adventure. To most, it might have seemed worn, but to Jayla, it represented possibility and connection to a family that believed in her. Inside the bag's front pocket, she found a note from Alexis: "Carry your dreams in this bag, and they'll take you further than you can imagine." The day of departure arrived with a flurry of last-minute preparations. Tasha fussed over Jayla's hair, repacked her suitcase twice to ensure nothing was forgotten, and quizzed her on emergency contacts and safety protocols. "Mom, I'll be fine," Jayla assured her with the confidence of youth. "Uncle Keith and Aunt Alexis's number is programmed in my phone, and I've memorized it anyway." At the security checkpoint, Tasha held Jayla tight. "Text me when you board, when you land, and when you get to the dorm." "Yes, Mom," Jayla promised, secretly cherishing her mother's protective nature. As she walked away toward the security line, Jayla placed her hand over the breast pocket of her jacket, feeling the outline of the small photo she carried, her father in his postal worker uniform, smiling broadly. It was the last picture taken before his death. The airport bustled with summer travelers. Jayla navigated security with the methodical approach she applied to everything, removing her shoes and placing her belongings in bins exactly as instructed. The TSA agent barely glanced at her boarding pass and ID before waving her through. Terminal 3 at O'Hare International Airport intimidated Jayla with its vastness and noise. Finding her gate took longer than expected, forcing her to hurry. When she finally arrived at gate K12, boarding had already begun for first-class passengers. Clutching her boarding pass and the Louis Vuitton bag that contained everything important for her trip, Jayla approached the gate, unaware that this simple act would set in motion a chain of events that would change the course of her summer, her future, and the policies of one of America's largest airlines. Bethany Miller had been a flight attendant with Armstrong Airlines for 7 years. At 34, she prided herself on her ability to read people and maintain the prestigious atmosphere of first class. What her performance reviews tactfully called attention to detail, her colleagues more accurately described as elitism and prejudice barely concealed beneath a professional veneer. On 3 separate occasions, passengers had filed complaints about Bethany's treatment. Each time, she'd successfully defended herself by citing security protocols and company standards. Her supervisor, Patricia Adams, had placed notes in her file but stopped short of formal disciplinary action. After all, Armstrong Airlines catered to an affluent clientele who expected exclusivity, and Bethany was merely maintaining standards, or so she claimed. When Jayla approached the boarding gate for flight AA-743 to San Francisco, Bethany was stationed at the entrance to the jet bridge, assisting with the first-class boarding process. Her gaze immediately locked onto Jayla. Specifically, on the worn Louis Vuitton bag hanging from the girl's shoulder. "First class is currently boarding," Bethany announced with practiced politeness that didn't reach her eyes. "Main cabin will begin boarding in approximately 20 minutes. Jayla stepped forward, extending her boarding pass. "I'm in first class, seat 3A. Bethany's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose as she took the boarding pass, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This is your boarding pass?" The emphasis on "your" carried unmistakable implications. "Yes, ma'am," Jayla replied, maintaining the respectful tone her mother had instilled in her. Bethany scanned the pass with deliberate slowness. "Well, this does appear to be a first-class ticket." Her eyes darted from the boarding pass to Jayla's simple jeans and Stanford University sweatshirt, then to the Louis Vuitton bag. "That's an interesting bag you have there." The comment, delivered with a thin smile, caused nearby passengers to glance over. Jayla shifted uncomfortably but remained silent. "May I see it for a moment?" Bethany asked, extending her hand without waiting for permission. Jayla hesitated. "All my important documents are in there." "I'm sure they are," Bethany replied with a condescending smile. "I just need to check something. Airline policy." Reluctantly, Jayla handed over the bag. Bethany made a show of examining it, turning it over in her hands and running her fingers along the worn edges and faded monogram pattern. She hummed loudly, ensuring nearby passengers could hear. "You know, we see a lot of counterfeit items. It's actually illegal to transport fake designer goods across state lines." Heat rushed to Jayla's face. "It's not fake. It was a gift from my aunt." "I'm sure it was," Bethany replied with a knowing smirk. "But this stitching here," she pointed to a corner of the bag where the leather had softened with age, "and these uneven patterns are obvious signs of a counterfeit item. The real ones don't wear like this." By now, a small crowd had formed. First-class passengers, delayed from boarding, watched with expressions ranging from impatience to uncomfortable fascination. Some pulled out phones, sensing the confrontation might be worth recording. "It's just old," Jayla explained, her voice growing smaller. "It was my aunt's first designer bag." "Must be very old indeed," Bethany remarked with exaggerated skepticism. "Or perhaps not a real Louis Vuitton at all. Either way, I'm concerned about your first-class ticket. We don't typically see," she paused, looking Jayla up and down, "young travelers like yourself in first class." The implication hung in the air, sharp and clear. By "young travelers like yourself," everyone within earshot understood Bethany meant young black travelers from obviously modest backgrounds. Jayla stood straighter, finding her voice. My uncle purchased the ticket for me. I'm traveling to Stanford University for their summer program for gifted students. Bethany's smile didn't waver. How nice for you. Still, I need to verify this ticket. We've had issues with fraudulent upgrades recently. She turned toward her colleague. Derek, could you come over here for a moment? Derek Foster, a flight attendant in his mid-20s, approached with visible reluctance. He'd worked with Bethany long enough to recognize her behavior patterns. What's the issue? He asked, glancing apologetically at Jayla. I'm concerned about this passenger's documentation and belongings, Bethany stated officially. The ticket seems unusual, and I'm questioning the authenticity of this bag. Derek looked uncomfortable. The boarding pass scanned properly, didn't it? Yes, but we need to be thorough, Bethany insisted. You know how these things can go. Better safe than sorry. The passengers around them had grown silent, creating an audience for Jayla's humiliation. An older white couple exchanged glances and stepped away, as if distancing themselves from an unpleasant scene. A businessman typed rapidly on his phone, occasionally looking up to observe. A woman with kind eyes caught Jayla's gaze and offered a sympathetic smile. Tears threatened to spill from Jayla's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. Her throat felt tight, her chest constricted with anxiety and shame. She thought of her mother's warnings about how the world might treat her despite her achievements, of her uncle's assurances that she belonged in any space her talents took her. The contradictions swirled painfully as she stood exposed to public scrutiny. Is this really necessary? Jayla finally asked, her voice wavering slightly. My flight leaves soon, and it's necessary when I say it's necessary, Bethany cut her off sharply, dropping all pretense of politeness. If you have nothing to hide, then you have nothing to worry about, do you? Now, I'm going to need to see some additional identification and, is there a problem with my wife's niece, Ms. Miller? The deep, authoritative voice sliced through the tense atmosphere like a blade. All heads turned toward the source, a tall, impeccably dressed black man in his 50s, his presence commanding immediate attention. Maxwell Armstrong, CEO and founder of Armstrong Airlines, stood at the edge of the gathered crowd, his expression a careful mask of controlled anger. The color drained from Bethany Miller's face. Maxwell Armstrong moved with deliberate calm through the parting crowd. His charcoal suit, tailored to perfection, bore the subtle pin of Armstrong Airlines on the lapel, a small detail most employees would immediately recognize. He wasn't supposed to be here today. His visit to O'Hare was unscheduled, part of his ongoing commitment to experience his airline as passengers did, without the artificial courtesy that typically surrounded his official visits. Bethany Miller stood frozen, Jayla's Louis Vuitton bag still dangling from her fingertips. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed, no words emerging. Mr. Armstrong, Derek Foster recovered first, straightening his posture. We weren't expecting you today, sir. Evidently not, Maxwell replied, his gaze fixed on Bethany before shifting to Jayla. His stern expression softened. Jayla, your Aunt Alexis has been worried. Your Uncle Keith asked me to check in on your flight when they couldn't reach you. My phone died, sir, Jayla explained quietly. I was going to charge it on the plane. Maxwell nodded, then extended his hand toward Bethany. I believe that bag belongs to my niece. Bethany handed it over immediately, her hand trembling slightly. Mr. Armstrong, I was simply following security protocols. We've had issues with counterfeit items and ticket fraud. I'm well aware of our security protocols, Ms. Miller, Maxwell interrupted, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable edge. I helped write them. What I'm not seeing is how they apply to publicly questioning the integrity of a first-class passenger's belongings. The onlookers shifted uncomfortably. The businessman who had been typing on his phone now recorded the interaction discreetly. The kind-eyed woman moved closer to Jayla, offering silent support. Sir, I was just, Bethany began. Being thorough. Maxwell supplied. Yes, I observed your thoroughness from the moment I arrived. Interesting that your thoroughness seems selectively applied. He handed the bag back to Jayla with gentle care. Maxwell had received Keith's call 20 minutes earlier. His brother-in-law had been trying to reach Jayla to ensure she'd made it to the gate on time. When her phone went straight to voicemail, Keith had called Maxwell, knowing he was in Chicago for meetings. Maxwell had promised to check on her, expecting to simply confirm she'd boarded safely and perhaps surprise her with his presence. Instead, he'd walked into a scene that was all too familiar to him. Ms. Miller, Mr. Foster, and Maxwell looked at the gate agent. Patricia Adams, sir. Senior flight attendant for today's service, the woman introduced herself, horrified by what she'd walked into. Ms. Adams. I'd like to speak with all of you privately before this flight departs. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Is there a staff room nearby? Yes, sir. Just down the jet bridge, Patricia confirmed. Derek stepped forward. The flight is scheduled to depart in 40 minutes, sir. Then we'll need to be efficient with our time, won't we? Maxwell replied. Bethany's professional demeanor had crumbled entirely. Mr. Armstrong, please understand, we'll discuss this privately, Ms. Miller, Maxwell cut her off firmly. He turned to Patricia. Could you please arrange for someone to assist my niece while we talk? Of course. Patricia quickly signaled to another flight attendant who was approaching the gate. Sydney, could you please help this young lady get settled on board and make sure she has everything she needs? Sydney Carter, a black flight attendant in her 30s, assessed the situation quickly. Absolutely. Happy to help. She approached Jayla with a warm smile. Would you like to board now, or would you prefer to wait a moment? Jayla looked uncertainly toward Maxwell. The public confrontation had left her shaken and unsure. It's your choice, Jayla, Maxwell assured her. Sydney will take good care of you either way. I think I'd like a minute, Jayla decided, her voice steadier now. Maxwell nodded. Sydney, is there a quiet place where Jayla can wait? The first-class lounge is just around the corner. I'll make sure she's comfortable there, Sydney promised. As Sydney gently guided Jayla away from the scene, the crowd of onlookers began to disperse, boarding passes clutched tightly, conversations hushed but animated. The businessman who had been recording approached Maxwell. Sir, I captured most of what happened here. If you or the young lady need this footage for any reason, thank you, Maxwell interrupted, taking the man's business card. We may be in touch. Once Jayla was safely out of earshot with Sydney, Maxwell turned to the three airline employees with an expression that had made boardroom opponents crumble. Now, he said quietly, shall we discuss what I just witnessed? The power dynamics had shifted completely. Bethany Miller, who moments ago had wielded her authority to humiliate a young black woman, now stood powerless before the ultimate authority in her professional world. Derek Foster looked torn between professional loyalty to his colleague and moral obligation to the truth. Patricia Adams appeared genuinely distressed by the situation she'd walked into. As they moved toward the private staff room, the whispers followed them through the terminal. Passengers who had witnessed the confrontation texted friends and family, posted on social media, and speculated about the fate of the flight attendant who had picked the wrong passenger to profile. Maxwell Armstrong's unexpected appearance had transformed what might have been just another incident of discrimination into something that would have lasting consequences, not just for Bethany Miller, but for Armstrong Airlines and, most importantly, for Jayla Washington. The staff room down the jet bridge was small but private, with a round table and 5 chairs. The fluorescent lighting cast harsh shadows across the faces of everyone present as Maxwell Armstrong closed the door behind them. Patricia Adams, Bethany Miller, and Derek Foster took seats, while Maxwell remained standing, his tall frame commanding the space. Before we begin, Maxwell said, his voice measured and controlled, I want to be absolutely clear about something. This conversation is not happening because Jayla Washington is my wife's niece. It's happening because what I witnessed out there violates the core values of Armstrong Airlines and my personal standards for how we treat any passenger. Bethany Miller sat rigidly in her chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by the nervous energy of someone who suddenly realized their job hung by a thread. Would someone care to explain exactly what was happening before I arrived? Maxwell asked, his gaze moving between the three employees. Patricia spoke first. Sir, I had just returned from assisting another passenger when I noticed the gathering at the gate. I was approaching to investigate when you arrived. Maxwell nodded. So you didn't witness the interaction from the beginning? No, sir, Patricia admitted. I take full responsibility for not being present. As senior flight attendant, I should have been overseeing the boarding process more closely. Maxwell turned his attention to Derek. Mr. Foster. Derek shifted uncomfortably. MS. Miller called me over because she said she needed assistance with verifying a passenger's documentation and, the authenticity of a bag. And did you find any legitimate concerns with either the documentation or the bag? Maxwell pressed. No, sir, Derek admitted, avoiding Bethany's glare. The boarding pass scanned properly, and I couldn't see any reason to question the passenger's belongings. Maxwell's gaze finally settled on Bethany. Ms. Miller. Bethany straightened her uniform jacket, visibly gathering herself. Mr. Armstrong, I understand how this might appear, but I was simply following security protocols. We've had incidents of ticket fraud and counterfeit goods being transported through our airline. Given the passenger's age and the condition of the bag, I felt it was my responsibility to be thorough. The passenger's age, Maxwell repeated slowly. And what else about the passenger prompted this extraordinary level of thoroughness, Ms. Miller? Nothing specific, sir, Bethany insisted. It was a combination of factors. The expensive ticket, the young age, the worn designer bag. It simply didn't add up. Didn't add up, Maxwell echoed, his voice dangerously quiet. Let me understand this correctly. A young black woman with a first-class ticket and a designer bag, admittedly worn but still functional. Didn't add up to you, so you felt justified in publicly questioning her character and embarrassing her in front of other passengers? The room fell silent. Patricia looked down at her hands. Derek stared at a point on the wall. Bethany's cheeks flushed with color. Sir, this has nothing to do with race, Bethany protested. I would have questioned any young person who seemed out of place in first class. Out of place, Maxwell repeated. And who exactly determines who is in place or out of place on my airline, Ms. Miller? Before Bethany could respond, Maxwell continued. Did you know that Jayla Washington is traveling to Stanford University on a full merit scholarship? That she has a perfect academic record despite growing up in circumstances that would challenge most adults? That the bag you so publicly questioned was a gift from my wife to her niece, specifically to celebrate Jayla's extraordinary achievements? Bethany swallowed hard. No, sir. I couldn't have known that. Precisely, Maxwell said. You couldn't have known anything about her story, her character, or her worthiness to sit in first class. Yet you made assumptions and acted on them in a way that caused humiliation and distress. He turned to Patricia. Ms. Adams, is this the first incident of this nature involving Ms. Miller? Patricia looked pained. No, sir. There have been concerns raised previously. 2 formal complaints and several informal ones, Maxwell specified, indicating he already knew the answer. All from passengers of color, primarily those seated in first or business class. Derek cleared his throat. Sir, if I may, there was an incident last month with a Hispanic executive that wasn't formally reported. Ms. Miller questioned his first-class ticket and asked for additional ID, even after his boarding pass cleared scanning. Bethany's head snapped toward Derek. That was a legitimate security concern. Was it? Maxwell asked. Or was it another example of what I just witnessed, assumptions based on appearance rather than facts? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Maxwell placed both hands on the table, leaning forward slightly. When I founded this airline 25 years ago, I did so with a clear vision. Yes, we would offer luxury and comfort, but never at the expense of dignity and respect. I've experienced the humiliation of being questioned, followed, suspected, simply because I didn't match someone's expectation of what belongs in premium spaces. I vowed that my airline would be different. He straightened up. Our zero-tolerance policy for discrimination isn't a public relations statement. It's a commitment I take personally. Every passenger who boards an Armstrong Airlines flight deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their age, race, appearance, or the condition of their luggage. Patricia nodded in agreement. Sir, given the circumstances, I believe Ms. Miller should not continue on this flight. I can arrange for another flight attendant to take her place. I agree, Maxwell said. But before we make that decision, I want to speak with Jayla. This incident happened to her, and I believe she should have input on how we proceed. Bethany looked up, alarm evident in her expression. Sir, are you saying my continued employment depends on the opinion of a 17-year-old girl? Maxwell's gaze hardened. Your continued employment, Ms. Miller, depends on your ability to treat all passengers with equal respect and dignity, something you've failed to demonstrate today and, apparently, on multiple previous occasions. What I'm saying is that Jayla Washington deserves the courtesy of being consulted about a situation in which she was the victim. What would you do if you were in Maxwell's position? Comment number 1 if you think Bethany should be immediately fired for her discriminatory behavior. Comment number 2 if you believe she deserves a second chance with proper training. Like this video if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to see more stories of justice being served. The question now is, what will Jayla decide about Bethany's fate? And how will this incident shape her already challenging journey to Stanford? Let's find out. The first-class lounge at O'Hare International Airport existed in stark contrast to the busy terminal outside. Plush chairs, ambient lighting, and a quiet atmosphere created a sanctuary that seemed designed to make travelers forget they were in an airport at all. For Jayla Washington, however, no amount of luxury could ease the knot of humiliation and anger twisting in her stomach. Sydney Carter, the flight attendant assigned to care for her, approached with a steaming cup of hot chocolate. I thought you might like something sweet, she offered, placing the cup on the small table beside Jayla's chair. Always helps me when I'm shaken up. Thank you, Jayla murmured, wrapping her fingers around the warm cup but not drinking. Sydney took a seat across from her. Do you want to talk about what happened, or would you prefer some quiet? Jayla looked up, studying Sydney's face for signs of the judgment or pity she dreaded. Instead, she found only genuine concern. I keep thinking about what I could have done differently, Jayla admitted. Maybe if I'd dressed more formally, or if I'd explained about the program right away. Stop that right now, Sydney interrupted gently but firmly. What happened out there wasn't your fault. You could have been wearing a ball gown and carrying a brand new designer bag with the tag still on, and some people would still find a reason to question your presence in first class. The truth in Sydney's words resonated with Jayla. This wasn't her first encounter with prejudice, just the most public one. She thought back to her 8th grade science fair, where a judge had questioned whether she'd really created her award-winning project without adult help. Or the time a security guard had followed her through an upscale department store while ignoring her white friends. Each incident had left a mark, invisible but lasting. I should call my mom, Jayla said suddenly, remembering her promise to stay in touch. And my Uncle Keith. They'll be worried. Sydney handed over her own phone. Your uncle already knows what happened. Mr. Armstrong called him before coming to find you. Jayla dialed her mother's number, which she knew by heart. Tasha Washington answered on the first ring. Hello. Mom, it's me. I'm using someone else's phone because mine died. Jayla. Thank God. Keith called me about what happened. Are you okay, baby? The sound of her mother's voice broke something inside Jayla. Tears she'd been holding back spilled over. No, she admitted, her voice cracking. I'm not okay. It was so humiliating, Mom. Everyone was staring at me like I didn't belong there. Sydney quietly moved away to give Jayla privacy, positioning herself near enough to offer support but far enough to allow for confidential conversation. Listen to me, Tasha's voice grew fierce with protective love. You belong anywhere your mind and heart take you. That flight attendant's behavior says everything about her and nothing about you. I know that logically, Jayla wiped at her tears. But it still hurts. Of course it does, baby. And it's okay to feel that hurt. Just don't let it change how you see yourself. They talked for a few more minutes, with Tasha alternating between comforting her daughter and expressing outrage at the situation. Finally, she asked the question Jayla had been pondering herself. Do you want to come home? We can find another way for you to get to Stanford tomorrow or the next day. Jayla considered it. The thought of boarding the plane where the incident had occurred, possibly facing whispers and stares from witnesses, made her stomach churn. But returning home felt like retreat, like letting Bethany Miller win. No, she decided. I'm going to get on that plane and go to Stanford as planned. That's my girl, Tasha said, pride evident in her voice. Call me when you land, no matter how late. After promising she would, Jayla handed the phone back to Sydney. Could I call my Uncle Keith too? Sydney nodded, returning the phone. Keith answered immediately. Jayla? Is that you? Yes, Uncle Keith. Maxwell told me what happened. I'm so sorry, kiddo. If I'd known my gift would cause you trouble, it's not the bag's fault, Jayla interrupted. And it's not yours either. I love the bag. It made me feel connected to you and Aunt Alexis while traveling. Keith sighed heavily. Still, I should have been there. Or warned you that sometimes people see what they expect to see, not what's actually there. Mom's been warning me about that my whole life, Jayla said with a sad smile that her uncle couldn't see. I just didn't expect it to happen so, publicly. Maxwell wants to know what you want to happen with the flight attendant, Keith said after a moment. He says it's your call. This surprised Jayla. My call? Why would the CEO of an airline care what I think? Because Maxwell knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of that kind of treatment. Before he built Armstrong Airlines, he was just another black man being followed around in stores and questioned in first-class lounges. This is personal for him. Jayla fell silent, considering the weight of the decision suddenly placed on her shoulders. What did she want? Part of her. The hurt, angry part, wanted Bethany Miller fired immediately. But another part recognized the complex reality of biases that often operated below conscious awareness. I need to think about it, she finally said. Take your time, Keith assured her. But not too much time, your flight leaves in about 30 minutes. After ending the call, Jayla sat back in the plush chair, finally taking a sip of the now lukewarm hot chocolate. Sydney had returned to a respectful distance but remained attentive. The luxury of the lounge felt incongruous with the turmoil inside her. The door opened, and Maxwell Armstrong entered. He'd removed his suit jacket, making him appear slightly less intimidating as he approached Jayla. May I join you? He asked. Jayla nodded, sitting up straighter. Maxwell took the seat Sydney had occupied earlier. I've spoken with the flight crew. Ms. Miller acknowledges her behavior was inappropriate, though she denies any racial motivation. They always do, Jayla said quietly. Maxwell's expression revealed a moment of shared understanding. Yes, they usually do. I've asked Ms. Adams to remove Ms. Miller from today's flight regardless of what else happens. I want to know what you think should happen beyond that. Jayla considered the question carefully. What are my options? We could terminate Ms. Miller's employment immediately. Her behavior violated our anti-discrimination policies, and this isn't her first offense. Or we could place her on probation, require her to complete comprehensive diversity training, and monitor her interactions with passengers moving forward. If you fire her, what happens to her? Jayla asked. Maxwell looked mildly surprised by the question. She'd receive standard severance based on her years of service. Beyond that, her career in aviation might be challenging, but that would be the consequence of her actions. Jayla thought about all the lessons she'd learned about justice and accountability, from her mother's wisdom to her debate team's ethical discussions. She thought about what her father would say if he were still alive. I don't want her fired, Jayla decided finally. I want her to learn why what she did was wrong. Really learn it, not just say the right words to keep her job. Maxwell studied her thoughtfully. You're showing more grace than many would in your position. It's not about grace, Jayla clarified. Firing her might satisfy my anger right now, but it won't change how she sees people who look like me. It won't prevent this from happening to someone else by another person with the same biases. Sydney, who had been keeping a respectful distance, approached with a fresh cup of hot chocolate. If I may, Mr. Armstrong, she said, setting down the cup, I've seen this kind of thing more times than I can count, from both sides of the uniform. Jayla's right. Firing one person doesn't fix the culture. Maxwell nodded slowly. So what would you suggest, Jayla? I want her to apologize, publicly, since she humiliated me publicly. And I want her to go through whatever training you have about bias and discrimination. But most importantly, I want Armstrong Airlines to look at how often this happens and do something systematic about it. A slow smile spread across Maxwell's face. That's remarkably similar to what my wife would say. Alexis always looks for the structural solution, not just the immediate fix. He stood up, decision made. Ms. Miller will apologize to you before the flight departs. She'll be suspended during an investigation and required to complete our most comprehensive diversity training program before returning to service. And I give you my word that Armstrong Airlines will undertake a thorough review of our training and policies regarding passenger interactions. Jayla felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Maxwell, please. We're family, after all. He checked his watch. Your flight boards in 15 minutes. Do you still want to travel today? I can arrange alternative transportation if you prefer. Jayla thought of her mother's pride and her own determination not to let this incident derail her opportunity. I'm getting on that plane, she said with newfound resolve. I've earned my place at Stanford, and I've earned my seat in first class. Sydney smiled. That's the spirit. And I'll be working this flight, so you'll have a friendly face on board. As they prepared to leave the lounge, Maxwell's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. It's Alexis. She's probably worried about you. Would you like to speak with her? Jayla nodded, taking the phone. Her aunt's warm voice came through immediately. Jayla? Are you alright? Maxwell told me what happened. I'm okay, Aunt Alexis. Better now. I'm so sorry about the bag. I never thought, the bag is perfect, Jayla interrupted firmly. And I'm going to keep carrying it proudly. In that moment, the worn Louis Vuitton transformed in Jayla's mind from a source of humiliation to a symbol of resilience. She would board that plane, take her rightful seat in first class, and carry her bag with her head held high, not despite what had happened, but because of it. The jet bridge to Armstrong Airlines Flight AA743 felt like a gauntlet to Jayla as she walked toward the aircraft door. Sydney Carter walked beside her, carrying Jayla's backpack while Jayla clutched the Louis Vuitton bag that had become the unwitting catalyst for the day's events. Behind them, Maxwell Armstrong followed at a respectful distance, his presence both reassuring and drawing curious glances from other passengers. At the aircraft door stood Patricia Adams, the senior flight attendant, alongside a visibly uncomfortable Bethany Miller. Derek Foster was nowhere to be seen, presumably already aboard and preparing the cabin for departure. Ms. Washington, Patricia greeted Jayla with genuine warmth. On behalf of Armstrong Airlines, I want to personally welcome you aboard and apologize for your experience today. Jayla nodded acknowledgement but said nothing, her eyes moving to Bethany, who seemed to have shrunk into herself, the confident authority she'd wielded earlier now completely absent. Maxwell stepped forward. Ms. Miller has something she would like to say to you, Jayla. Other passengers are approaching, so this will happen with witnesses, as we agreed. Bethany looked up, her expression a complex mixture of embarrassment, resentment, and resignation. She straightened her uniform and cleared her throat. Ms. Washington, I apologize for my behavior earlier. My actions were inappropriate and unprofessional. I made assumptions about you based on factors that should never influence how I treat a passenger. I'm sorry for the public embarrassment I caused you. The apology sounded rehearsed but not entirely insincere. Jayla studied Bethany's face, searching for some indication that the woman truly understood the impact of her actions. Do you understand why what you did was wrong? Jayla asked quietly. The question seemed to catch Bethany off guard. She'd clearly expected Jayla to simply accept the apology and move on. Yes. I failed to treat you with the respect all passengers deserve. It's not just about respect, Jayla pressed. It's about assumptions. You decided I didn't belong based on how I look. A flicker of defensiveness crossed Bethany's face before she visibly suppressed it. You're right. I made assumptions I had no right to make, and I'm sorry. Behind them, a line of passengers had formed, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. Some recognized Maxwell from company publications or news features, adding to the unusual nature of the scene. A few had their phones partially raised, though no one dared to openly record with the CEO present. Maxwell cleared his throat. Ms. Miller will not be working on this flight. She'll be on administrative leave pending completion of additional training. He addressed this to Jayla but pitched his voice to be heard by those nearby. Additionally, I want all our passengers to know that Armstrong Airlines is committed to creating an environment where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. Today we failed to uphold that commitment, and for that, I personally apologize. This public declaration from the CEO himself caused a ripple of whispers among the gathering passengers. It was virtually unheard of for an airline CEO to personally address an incident of this nature at the boarding gate. Jayla, feeling the weight of too many eyes upon her, simply nodded. Thank you. I'd like to board now. Of course, Patricia said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the aircraft door. Sydney will be taking care of first class today. If you need anything at all during the flight, please don't hesitate to ask. As Jayla moved past Bethany, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, Jayla saw something shift in the flight attendant's expression. Perhaps the first glimmer of genuine realization about her actions. It wasn't enough, not yet, but it was something. Sydney led Jayla to seat 3A, a window position in the first-class cabin with no one assigned to the adjacent seat, an intentional buffer arranged by Maxwell. The cabin was elegantly appointed with leather seats, wood accents, and subdued lighting that created an atmosphere of exclusive comfort. Can I get you anything before other passengers board? Sydney asked, stowing Jayla's backpack in the overhead compartment while Jayla kept the Louis Vuitton bag at her feet. Just some water, please, Jayla requested, settling into the spacious seat. As Sydney moved away to fulfill the request, Maxwell appeared at Jayla's row. I won't be flying with you today, too many meetings in Chicago, but I wanted to make sure you were comfortable before I leave. I'm fine, Jayla assured him, though fine was an overstatement. She felt drained by the emotional roller coaster of the past hour. Alexis will meet you when you land in San Francisco, Maxwell informed her. She insisted, and frankly, I'd feel better knowing she's there." This unexpected kindness touched Jayla. "She doesn't have to do that." "Try telling her that," Maxwell said with a warm smile. "My wife is remarkably stubborn when she sets her mind to something." Sydney returned with Jayla's water, along with a tablet. "Mr. Armstrong had our entertainment system loaded with some additional content he thought you might enjoy," she explained. "Including several documentaries about successful women in STEM fields." Jayla accepted the tablet with surprise. "Thank you." Maxwell shrugged modestly. "Keith mentioned your interest in computer science. I thought you might find some inspiration for your summer at Stanford." With a final reassurance that everything was taken care of, Maxwell departed, leaving Jayla to compose herself before the remaining passengers boarded. She sipped her water and tried to process the whirlwind of events that had transformed what should have been an exciting journey into something far more complicated. The boarding process continued, with business and economy passengers filing past the first-class cabin. Jayla felt their curious glances, some sympathetic, others merely intrigued by the young black girl sitting alone in first class. She kept her gaze fixed on the tablet, shoulders straight, channeling her mother's advice, "Never let them see they've wounded you." A middle-aged white woman paused beside Jayla's row. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I saw what happened at the gate. I just wanted to say I'm sorry you had to experience that." Jayla looked up, surprised by the unexpected support. "Thank you. My daughter is about your age," the woman continued. "I'd be furious if someone treated her that way. You handled it with remarkable poise." Before Jayla could respond, a businessman a few rows back called out, "Could we keep moving, please? Some of us have connections to make." The woman rolled her eyes but continued to her seat. Jayla returned to her tablet, but the brief interaction had soothed something within her. A reminder that not everyone shared Bethany Miller's prejudices. As the aircraft door closed and the safety demonstration began, Jayla gazed out the window at O'Hare's sprawling concrete expanse. Somewhere out there, her mother was probably still sitting in the airport parking lot, unwilling to leave until she knew Jayla's flight had safely departed. The plane pushed back from the gate, and Sydney appeared at Jayla's side. "We've got about 4 hours to San Francisco. The flight's not full, so first class is pretty quiet today. Just let me know if you need anything at all." "Actually," Jayla said, surprising herself with the request, "could you tell me how you became a flight attendant? Was it always what you wanted to do?" Sydney's face lit up with a genuine smile. "Not at all. I was pre-med in college, if you can believe it. Life takes some unexpected turns." She glanced down the aisle to ensure other passengers were settled. "I'll tell you all about it once we're at cruising altitude." As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, Jayla's phone, now charged thanks to the power outlet at her seat, buzzed with a message from her mother, "Proud of you. Always. Call when you land." The simple text brought tears to Jayla's eyes, but these were different from the ones she'd fought back during Bethany's interrogation. These were tears of gratitude for the unconditional support that had carried her through the day's challenges. The engines roared as the plane accelerated down the runway. As they lifted into the sky, Jayla placed her hand on the worn Louis Vuitton bag beside her. What had begun as a symbol of humiliation had transformed into something else. A reminder of her resilience and the network of support that surrounded her, from her mother's sacrifices to her uncle's generosity to her aunt's thoughtfulness. The incident with Bethany Miller wasn't over, its effects would ripple through Jayla's summer and beyond. But as Chicago receded beneath clouds gilded by the afternoon sun, Jayla felt a growing certainty that she would emerge from this experience not diminished, but strengthened. Stanford University's campus sprawled like an elegant terracotta dream against the California sky, its Spanish colonial architecture and palm-lined pathways creating an atmosphere of academic prestige that intimidated and excited Jayla in equal measure. After the turbulent start to her journey, arriving at the campus felt like reaching a sanctuary, albeit one with its own challenges ahead. Alexis Armstrong had been waiting at San Francisco International Airport as promised, greeting Jayla with a warm embrace that somehow communicated understanding without pity. They'd driven to Stanford in Alexis's sleek electric car, the conversation flowing easily between them despite having met in person only a handful of times before. Alexis had a gift for making people feel comfortable, asking about Jayla's interests and sharing stories about her own college days without once making Jayla feel she needed to discuss the incident on the plane. "The dorms are this way," Alexis said as they walked across the main quad, Jayla's suitcase rolling behind them while the now infamous Louis Vuitton bag hung from Jayla's shoulder. "I stayed in the same building during a summer program when I was about your age. Were you nervous?" Jayla asked, eyeing the imposing stone building ahead. "Terrified," Alexis admitted with a laugh. "I was convinced everyone else was smarter than me and they'd discover I didn't belong." "Did they?" "Quite the opposite. I graduated top of my class," Alexis winked. "Just like you will." The residence hall bustled with activity as students from across the country arrived for the 6-week program. Alexis helped Jayla locate her assigned room on the 3rd floor, where they found the door already decorated with 2 name tags, Jayla Washington and Zoe Franklin. "Looks like your roommate might already be here," Alexis observed. As if on cue, the door swung open to reveal a girl with curly auburn hair and freckles scattered across her nose. She wore faded jeans and a t-shirt emblazoned with the periodic table. "You must be Jayla," she said with a broad smile. "I'm Zoe. I took the bed by the window, hope that's okay." "Oh, hello," she added, noticing Alexis. "This is my Aunt Alexis," Jayla explained. "She gave me a ride from the airport." "Nice to meet you," Zoe said, then turned back to Jayla. "So, computer science, right? That's what your student profile said." "I'm focusing on biochemistry, but I code a little too. Python mostly, some Java." The rapid-fire welcome momentarily disoriented Jayla, but she found herself smiling at Zoe's enthusiasm. "Yeah, computer science and maybe artificial intelligence if I can get into those seminars." "Oh, you definitely should. Dr. Winters is leading those, and she's brilliant. Tough, but brilliant." Alexis helped Jayla unpack while Zoe chatted about the campus, the program schedule, and the various social events planned for the summer. The casual camaraderie was exactly what Jayla needed after the tension of the previous day. When it came time for Alexis to leave, she pulled Jayla into another hug. "Remember, you earned your place here," she whispered. "Don't let anyone make you doubt that, especially not yourself." With those words of encouragement, Alexis departed, leaving Jayla to settle into her temporary home. Zoe proved to be a welcome distraction, her endless curiosity and open friendliness making it impossible for Jayla to dwell on negative thoughts. "So where are you from?" Zoe asked as they walked to the welcome dinner that evening. "Chicago. South Side. Cool. I'm from rural Maine. Population literally smaller than this summer program. This is my first time west of the Mississippi." As they entered the dining hall, a buzz of excited conversations filled the air. Brilliant young minds from diverse backgrounds mingled around tables laden with food far superior to typical cafeteria fare. Jayla scanned the room, automatically counting the number of faces that looked like hers, a habit born from years of often being the only black student in advanced classes. She was pleased to note several other black students among the group. "Let's sit there," Zoe suggested, pointing to a table where 4 other students were engaged in animated discussion. As they approached, Jayla recognized the topic, ethical implications of facial recognition technology. "Mind if we join?" Zoe asked. The group welcomed them warmly, making quick introductions before pulling them into the debate. For the first time since the incident at O'Hare, Jayla felt herself fully engaged in something other than replaying the humiliating confrontation. Here, her ideas mattered more than her appearance or belongings. The blissful intellectual immersion lasted until she returned to the dorm and checked her phone. 23 notifications awaited her, including multiple messages from her mother and Uncle Keith asking if she was okay. The reason became clear when she opened social media. A video of her confrontation with Bethany Miller had gone viral, already amassing hundreds of thousands of views across platforms. "Oh no," Jayla whispered, sinking onto her bed. Zoe looked up from her laptop. "What's wrong?" "Something happened at the airport yesterday. Someone recorded it and now it's everywhere." Jayla handed her phone to Zoe, who watched with widening eyes. "That's you." "Oh my God, Jayla. That flight attendant was completely out of line. And now everyone's seeing it," Jayla groaned. "This is exactly what I didn't want. But she was wrong, not you. If anything, this video makes you look incredibly composed while she looks terrible." Jayla shook her head. "I don't want to be known as that girl from the viral video. I came here to learn and build my future, not become some internet example of discrimination." Zoe sat beside her. "For what it's worth, no one here has mentioned it. And if they do, I'll help set them straight." The offer of alliance, so freely given by someone she just met, touched Jayla deeply. "Thanks, Zoe." Despite Zoe's reassurance, the first week of the program proved challenging as Jayla struggled to focus amid the growing online attention. Several classmates clearly recognized her, their whispered conversations and furtive glances making concentration difficult. Academic sessions that should have been exhilarating became exercises in maintaining composure. The breaking point came during an algorithm design workshop. Jayla was presenting her solution to a complex problem when a male student in the back raised his hand. "Is it true you're the girl from that airline video? The one with the fake bag?" The room fell silent. Jayla froze, her carefully constructed algorithm forgotten as heat rushed to her face. Before she could respond, the workshop instructor, Dr. Elaine Winters, intervened. "That question is irrelevant to this academic discussion," Dr. Winters stated firmly. "Ms. Washington, please continue your presentation." Jayla tried, but the damage was done. She stumbled through the remainder of her explanation, acutely aware of the curious stares from her peers. When the session ended, she gathered her materials quickly, intending to retreat to her room. "Ms. Washington, a moment please," Dr. Winters called as students filed out. Reluctantly, Jayla approached the professor's desk. Dr. Winters was a renowned computer scientist whose work on algorithmic bias had revolutionized the field. Under different circumstances, Jayla would have been thrilled by this one-on-one attention. "Your algorithm was innovative, Dr. Winters began, but your presentation lacked the confidence I've observed in your written work." "I'm sorry, Dr. Winters. The question caught me off guard." "Understandably so." Dr. Winters removed her glasses, her expression softening. "Yes, I've seen the video. Many of us have. What interests me more is how you're planning to channel that experience." Jayla blinked in surprise. "Channel it?" Throughout history, many groundbreaking innovations have emerged from personal adversity. The most meaningful work often comes from our deepest challenges. The professor pulled up a presentation on her tablet. "Your application essay discussed using AI to detect and mitigate bias in automated systems. Given recent events, that work seems even more relevant, doesn't it?" For the first time in days, Jayla felt a spark of genuine excitement. "I've been thinking about algorithms that could identify discriminatory patterns in customer service interactions. That's exactly the kind of application I'd like to see. Would you be interested in developing this concept as your summer project? I could mentor you directly." The offer was extraordinary. Dr. Winters typically worked only with PhD candidates. "Yes, absolutely," Jayla agreed immediately. "Good. Let's meet weekly to discuss your progress. And Jayla," Dr. Winters added as she rose to leave, "don't let one ignorant question diminish your voice. Your ideas deserve to be heard." That conversation marked a turning point. With Dr. Winters' mentorship, Jayla channeled her energy into research, developing an algorithm that could analyze linguistic patterns in service interactions to identify potential discrimination. The work became not just academically fulfilling but personally healing, transforming a painful experience into something potentially beneficial for others. Zoe proved to be an invaluable friend, offering both emotional support and intellectual challenges that pushed Jayla's thinking further. Together, they navigated the social dynamics of the program, finding their place among peers who gradually stopped seeing Jayla as the girl from the video and started recognizing her as a formidable academic talent. 3 weeks into the program, as the viral interest finally began to wane, Jayla received an unexpected message from Maxwell Armstrong. He would be visiting Stanford the following day and hoped to meet with her. "Do you think it's about the incident?" Zoe asked as they prepared for bed that night. Jayla shrugged, her fingers absently tracing the worn edges of the Louis Vuitton bag that now sat proudly on her desk. "Probably. But whatever it is, I'm ready." And surprisingly, she meant it. The Stanford University Coffee House, affectionately known as Coho by students, hummed with activity as Jayla waited for Maxwell Armstrong. She'd chosen a corner table that offered some privacy while still allowing her to observe the diverse crowd of students engaged in animated conversations over laptops and lattes. 3 weeks into the summer program, she felt increasingly at home in this environment of intellectual curiosity and academic ambition. "Sorry I'm late," Maxwell said, appearing at her table with 2 cups. "I took a chance and got you hot chocolate. Sydney mentioned it was your preference." Jayla accepted the drink with a smile. "Thank you. It's nice to see you again, Mr. Armstrong." "Maxwell, please. How has the program been treating you?" "It's been challenging but in the best way," Jayla replied, relaxing slightly. "I'm working on a research project with Dr. Winters about algorithmic bias detection in customer service interactions." Maxwell's eyebrows rose with interest. "Turning your experience into something constructive. That's impressive, Jayla." "It seemed better than letting it define me negatively," she said with a shrug that belied the emotional work behind that decision. Maxwell nodded in understanding. "That's actually related to why I wanted to meet with you today. I've been making some changes at Armstrong Airlines that I thought you should hear about directly." He placed a tablet on the table between them, displaying a formal document with the Armstrong Airlines logo. "This is the report from our internal investigation, which is now complete. I wanted you to be one of the first to know the outcomes." Jayla scanned the document, her eyes widening at the thoroughness of the investigation. It went far beyond Bethany Miller's actions, examining patterns of customer complaints across the airline over the past 5 years. "You found a pattern," she observed. "Yes. Complaints about discriminatory treatment were disproportionately filed by passengers of color, particularly those traveling in premium cabins. The data confirmed what many of us have experienced personally but couldn't previously prove systematically." Maxwell swiped to another page showing a comprehensive action plan. "Based on these findings, we're implementing several changes. First, mandatory bias awareness training for all customer-facing staff, with special modules for those working in first and business class. Second, a new reporting system that tracks patterns of complaints by employee. Third, changes to our hiring practices to increase diversity at all levels." "What about Bethany?" Jayla asked, the question she'd been wondering since that day at O'Hare. Maxwell's expression grew thoughtful. "She's completed the first phase of our diversity training program. Her initial reaction was defensive, as you might expect. She insisted she would have questioned anyone with a worn designer bag, regardless of race. But the data shows otherwise," Jayla concluded, gesturing to the report. "Exactly. When confronted with the pattern of complaints against her specifically, she couldn't maintain that position. The turning point came during a session where she heard directly from passengers who had experienced discrimination, not just on our airline but throughout their lives. Maxwell showed her a handwritten letter. "She asked me to give you this. You don't have to read it now," or ever, if you prefer. Jayla took the envelope hesitantly. Has she changed? I believe she's starting to. True change takes time and continuous effort. She's requested to return to service but in a different role initially, working on our training team to share her learning process with others. We're considering her request, with appropriate supervision. The concept of Bethany transforming from perpetrator to educator stirred complex emotions in Jayla. She slipped the unopened letter into her bag. I'll read it later. Maxwell nodded, respecting her decision. Beyond individual cases like Bethany's, we're making structural changes. The incident with you highlighted weaknesses in our corporate culture that need addressing. He shared details of new accountability measures, revised customer service protocols, and a diversity task force that would include flight attendants, pilots, ground staff, and management representatives. We're also partnering with several civil rights organizations to develop industry-wide best practices, Maxwell continued. What happened to you was unfortunately not unique to Armstrong Airlines. The problem exists throughout the travel industry and beyond. Jayla listened intently, impressed by the scope of changes triggered partly by her experience. This is much more comprehensive than I expected. Your suggestion that day, that we look at systemic issues rather than just punishing one person, stuck with me, Maxwell admitted. It showed wisdom beyond your years. He paused, studying her thoughtfully. How do you feel about being the catalyst for these changes? It's a lot of responsibility to place on the shoulders of someone your age. Jayla considered the question carefully. 3 weeks ago, she might have felt overwhelmed by the weight of it, but her time at Stanford had changed her perspective. Initially, I just wanted to forget it happened, she admitted. I was embarrassed about being the girl from the video. But Dr. Winters helped me see that personal experiences can inform meaningful work. She gestured to her laptop where her research project was saved. I'm using what happened to develop tools that might prevent similar incidents. If Armstrong Airlines is doing the same on a corporate level, that transforms something negative into something constructive. Maxwell smiled with approval. That's a remarkably mature outlook. I had good examples, Jayla said, thinking of her mother's resilience, her uncle's generosity, and now Dr. Winters' mentorship. Plus, my roommate Zoe has been amazing. When the video first went viral, she stood up for me when others were whispering. You've built a strong support system, Maxwell observed. That's a valuable skill in itself. Their conversation shifted to Jayla's research project, which genuinely interested Maxwell. They discussed potential applications of her algorithm within the airline industry, with Maxwell offering insights from a business perspective that complemented Dr. Winters' academic approach. As their meeting drew to a close, Maxwell had one final surprise. I've been impressed by your handling of this situation from the beginning, Jayla. Your ability to think critically about complex issues while managing your own emotional response shows remarkable potential. He handed her a business card. Armstrong Airlines offers internships to exceptional students interested in corporate ethics and policy development. If you'd consider joining us next summer, I'd personally ensure you have the opportunity to help shape our ongoing efforts. Jayla stared at the card in astonishment. An internship? At corporate headquarters? With appropriate compensation, of course, Maxwell added. Think about it. No pressure to decide immediately. The offer represented something Jayla hadn't dared imagine, a direct path from academic theory to real-world impact. I'll definitely consider it. Thank you. As they parted ways, Jayla felt a profound sense of closure combined with new possibility. What had begun as a humiliating incident now appeared more like the first chapter of a much longer story, one in which she played an active role rather than merely being acted upon. That evening, alone in her dorm room while Zoe attended a study group, Jayla finally opened Bethany Miller's letter. The handwriting was neat and precise, much like the woman herself. Dear Jayla, *words cannot adequately express my regret for how I treated you that day at O'Hare. While I could offer excuses about stress or security protocols, the truth is simpler and harder to admit. I made assumptions based on biases I wasn't fully aware I held. The training I've undergone has forced me to confront uncomfortable truths about my thinking and behavior. I've learned that intentions don't erase impact, and that, I didn't mean it that way, doesn't heal the hurt caused. I want you to know that your decision, asking for education rather than termination, has changed my life. It would have been easier for you to demand my firing, and no one would have blamed you. Your choice to push for systemic change instead of personal vengeance showed a wisdom I'm still working to develop. I don't expect or ask for your forgiveness. That would be another burden placed unfairly on your shoulders. I only want you to know that your actions that day are having ripple effects throughout Armstrong Airlines and in my own life. With sincere regret and gratitude. Bethany Miller. Jayla read the letter twice before setting it aside. The apology seemed genuine, the acknowledgement of growth encouraging. Whether it represented lasting change in Bethany remained to be seen, but Jayla found herself hoping it did. She turned back to her laptop, to the algorithm she was developing. The code had evolved significantly under Dr. Winter's guidance, incorporating machine learning elements that could identify subtle linguistic patterns associated with bias treatment. As she worked late into the night, Jayla felt a growing certainty about her path forward. The summer program would end in 3 weeks. She would return to Chicago with new knowledge, experiences, and connections. Her research project would be presented at the program's closing symposium, with Dr. Winters already suggesting it had potential for publication in an undergraduate journal. And next summer, perhaps, she would accept Maxwell's internship offer and help ensure that what happened to her wouldn't happen to someone else. The worn Louis Vuitton bag, still proudly displayed on her desk, would accompany her on that journey too, a reminder of how far she'd come and how much further she could go. 2 months after the incident that had unexpectedly thrust her into viral fame, Jayla Washington stood in the departures terminal of San Francisco International Airport, her Stanford University summer program officially complete. The certificate of recognition for her exceptional research project was carefully packed in her checked luggage, along with new textbooks, Stanford merchandise, and countless memories of a transformative summer. "I can't believe it's over already," Zoe Franklin said, standing beside her with red-rimmed eyes. The two roommates had formed a friendship that transcended their academic collaboration, becoming each other's support system throughout the challenging program. "We'll see each other again," Jayla promised, fighting back her own tears. "You're applying to University of Chicago, remember? That's my first choice too. And when we're famous scientists, we'll credit this summer as where it all began," Zoe added with a watery smile. They embraced one final time before Zoe departed for her own terminal, leaving Jayla to navigate the remainder of her journey alone. As she approached the security checkpoint, she found herself scanning the faces of TSA agents, unconsciously bracing for potential conflict. The habit of vigilance, heightened after her experience with Bethany Miller, was not easily set aside. Yet her passage through security proceeded smoothly. The TSA agent barely glanced at her as he verified her ID and boarding pass. The whole process took less than 5 minutes, unremarkable in every way, exactly as it should be. Gate B24 bustled with afternoon travelers. Jayla noticed immediate differences in Armstrong Airlines operations compared to 2 months earlier. The staff appeared more diverse, with people of various ages, races, and backgrounds visible in both customer service and gate agent roles. A prominent display near the boarding area highlighted the company's newly enhanced commitment to inclusive service, featuring QR codes linking to customer feedback forms. Boarding will begin shortly for Armstrong Airlines Flight 529 to Chicago O'Hare, announced the gate agent. We'll start with passengers needing special assistance, followed by our first-class cabin. Jayla prepared her boarding pass on her phone. Uncle Keith had once again gifted her a first-class ticket for the return journey, insisting she deserved the comfort after her academic achievements. This time, however, she approached the privilege with a new perspective, understanding both its value and its arbitrary nature in defining human worth. As first-class boarding was called, Jayla joined the short line, her now familiar Louis Vuitton bag hanging confidently from her shoulder. The worn edges and faded monogram that had once been targets of scrutiny now felt like badges of honor, symbols of a journey that extended far beyond physical travel. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Washington," greeted the gate agent with a warm smile. "Congratulations on completing the Stanford program. We've noted you had an exceptional experience there." Surprised by the personalized welcome, Jayla smiled in return. "Thank you." The jet bridge stretched before her, the path to the aircraft door bringing an unexpected wave of déjà vu. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was a new day, a different flight, a changed airline. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant checked her boarding pass and directed her to seat 2A. As Jayla turned toward the first-class cabin, she froze in momentary shock. Standing in the galley, arranging welcome beverages, was Bethany Miller. Their eyes met across the small space, mutual recognition immediate. Bethany appeared different somehow, her posture less rigid, her expression softer than Jayla remembered. She wore a small pin on her uniform lapel that Jayla didn't recognize, something new to the Armstrong Airlines accessories. "Ms. Washington," Bethany said quietly, her voice carrying no trace of the condescension that had marked their first encounter. "May I speak with you privately for a moment?" Jayla hesitated, glancing toward her assigned seat and the relative safety it offered. But curiosity, and perhaps something more, compelled her to nod. Bethany led her to a small alcove near the galley, away from the flow of boarding passengers. "I didn't know you would be on this flight," she began. "It wasn't planned this way. Are you back to regular flight duties?" Jayla asked, surprised to see her working a flight so soon. "Not exactly. I'm part of a new training initiative," Bethany explained, indicating the pin on her lapel. "After completing the diversity education program, I applied to join the implementation team. We're demonstrating new approaches to passenger interaction on select routes." She paused, clearly choosing her next words carefully. "When I wrote you that letter, I was still early in my learning process. Since then, I've come to understand more deeply how my actions affected you and what they represented." "And what did they represent?" Jayla asked, genuinely curious about Bethany's perspective now. "A lifetime of unchallenged assumptions about who belongs in which spaces," Bethany admitted. "Assumptions I didn't even realize I was making until they were exposed." The honesty in her response surprised Jayla. "That's insightful. I requested to work this specific flight when I saw your name on the manifest," Bethany continued. "Not to make you uncomfortable, but to show you that your decision to advocate for education rather than termination has had real impact. It would have been easier for everyone if I'd simply been fired. The harder path, changing minds and behaviors, is producing more meaningful results." She gestured toward the cabin where other flight attendants interacted with boarding passengers. "Our entire training program has been redesigned. All staff now receive specific instruction on recognizing and addressing unconscious bias. The changes you inspired go far beyond me." Jayla absorbed this information thoughtfully. "I'm glad something positive came from what happened." "More than you know," Bethany assured her. "But I won't keep you from your seat. I just wanted to thank you personally for the grace you showed in a situation where it wasn't required or expected." As Jayla settled into the comfortable first-class seat, she reflected on the unexpected encounter. The Bethany Miller she'd just spoken with seemed genuinely transformed from the woman who had publicly humiliated her 2 months earlier. Whether that transformation was complete or lasting remained to be seen, but the effort itself represented progress. The flight home passed uneventfully. True to her word, Bethany maintained professional courtesy without hovering or overcompensating. She treated Jayla as she did every other passenger, with respect, attentiveness, and appropriate boundaries. The normalcy of the interaction felt like its own kind of victory. When the plane touched down at O'Hare, Jayla felt the familiar surge of excitement that came with returning home. Chicago, with all its complexities and challenges, remained the foundation from which she'd launched and to which she'd always return. In the arrivals hall, she spotted her mother immediately. Tasha Washington stood tall and proud, her face illuminated with joy at the sight of her daughter. Beside her stood Uncle Keith and Aunt Alexis, and to Jayla's surprise, Maxwell Armstrong himself. "Mom!" Jayla called, quickening her pace as she navigated through the crowd. Tasha enveloped her in a fierce embrace. "Look at you," she whispered, pulling back to examine her daughter's face. "Stanford's been good to you." "It really has," Jayla agreed, turning to embrace Uncle Keith and Aunt Alexis. "We're so proud of you, kiddo," Keith said, his voice thick with emotion. "Top marks in that fancy program, and already changing the world." Maxwell stepped forward, extending his hand professionally, then breaking into a warm smile. "Your research project impressed quite a few people at Stanford. Dr. Winters sent me the abstract. It has real-world applications we'd love to explore further." "First, dinner," Tasha insisted, taking charge as mothers do. "My daughter needs a proper Chicago meal after 2 months of California cuisine." They gathered at Tasha's favorite restaurant, a family-owned soul food establishment where the owner greeted them like long-lost relatives. Around a table laden with comfort food, Jayla shared stories of her summer, the challenging coursework, late-night study sessions with Zoe, the mentorship from Dr. Winters, and the unexpected recognition her research had received. "So what about this internship Maxwell mentioned?" Keith asked as dessert was served. "Sounds like an amazing opportunity." Jayla nodded. "It would be in the corporate ethics division, helping implement and monitor the new anti-discrimination policies. And you'd be working directly with our head of operations," Maxwell added. "Not getting coffee for anyone." "I've been thinking about it a lot," Jayla admitted. "At first, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be so closely associated with what happened. But then I realized, that incident doesn't define me, but what I do with it might define the experiences of others." Tasha reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "You've always turned challenges into stepping stones, just like your father would have." The mention of James Washington brought a moment of bittersweet reflection to the table. "He would have been so proud today," Keith said softly. "He is proud," Tasha corrected gently. "Wherever he is." As the evening wound down, Maxwell and Alexis excused themselves, promising to be in touch about the internship details. Keith and Alexis followed shortly after, leaving mother and daughter to share a quiet cab ride home. In the comfortable silence of their familiar apartment, Jayla unpacked the worn Louis Vuitton bag that had traveled with her from Chicago to Stanford and back again. She placed it carefully on her desk, where it would remain until next summer when it would accompany her to the Armstrong Airlines headquarters for her internship. "You know," Tasha said, watching from the doorway, "when Keith gave you that bag, I worried it might give you the wrong message. That fancy things matter more than substance." "It taught me a different lesson," Jayla replied, running her fingers along the bag's weathered surface. "That worth isn't determined by appearances or assumptions. That standing your ground doesn't always mean fighting fire with fire." Tasha smiled with maternal pride. "You're going to change things, Jayla. Not just algorithms or airline policies, but how people see each other." "I'm going to try," Jayla promised. 6 months later, as winter released its grip on Chicago and the first hints of spring appeared, Jayla received an email from Armstrong Airlines confirming the details of her summer internship. Attached was a photograph taken at the company's headquarters, a framed display of their newly implemented passenger respect policy, officially named the Washington Protocol. Below the photograph was a personal note from Maxwell. "Change begins with one person willing to stand up, one company willing to look in the mirror, and one community willing to do better. Thank you for being that person, Jayla. See you this summer." As Jayla prepared for her senior year of high school and the internship beyond, she kept the Louis Vuitton bag in sight, not as a reminder of humiliation, but as a symbol of transformation. What had begun as a moment of public shame had become the catalyst for personal growth and institutional change. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but Jayla Washington now faced them with confidence born of experience, supported by a community that recognized her worth, and driven by a determination to ensure that others would not face the discrimination she had overcome. What would you do if you were in Jayla's position? Would you have accepted the internship and continued working with the airline, or would you have chosen a different path? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of resilience and positive change touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more inspirational content. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that one person really can make a difference. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most powerful response to discrimination isn't anger, but transformation. This story teaches us powerful lessons about resilience, prejudice, and creating positive change. When faced with discrimination, Jayla chose a path of dignity rather than vengeance. Instead of simply demanding punishment, she advocated for education and systemic change, a decision that ultimately transformed both individuals and institutions. We learn that true worth cannot be measured by appearances or possessions. Bethany's assumptions about who belongs in premium spaces revealed biases many hold unconsciously. The most meaningful change often begins with recognizing these biases in ourselves. The story also illustrates how support systems matter. From Jayla's mother's unwavering encouragement to Zoe's immediate alliance to Dr. Winter's mentorship, each person strengthened Jayla's ability to transform adversity into opportunity. Perhaps most importantly, we see how a single incident can catalyze widespread improvement when approached with wisdom rather than anger. By turning her painful experience into constructive action, both through her research and cooperation with Armstrong Airlines, Jayla created ripple effects far beyond her individual situation. What would you do if you experienced discrimination like Jayla did? Would you have chosen education over termination for someone who humiliated you publicly? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of turning prejudice into positive change resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives about overcoming injustice. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs encouragement to stand tall in difficult situations. Remember, sometimes our most painful experiences become our greatest opportunities for growth and creating meaningful change. Thank you for watching, and may you find the strength to transform your own challenges into stepping stones toward a better future.